The alien marketplace was loud and cruel. Merchants shouted, buyers bargained, and laughter echoed under the broken lights. Cages were lined up in the center, each filled with frightened slaves. Some were tall and strong, others weak and broken, but all of them carried fear in their eyes. The crowd circled like hungry vultures, eager to find something they could use, something they could own. Then, from the shadows, guards shoved a tiny alien girl onto the stage. She stumbled, her bare feet scraping against the rough wood. Her body was thin, almost fragile, her skin bruised and dirty. The chains around her wrists clinked as she tried to balance herself. Her large eyes looked down, too scared to meet the crowd's gaze. The auctioneer smirked, raising his hand to silence the noise. "Look at this one," he shouted, his voice sharp. "Too small, too weak, and completely useless." The crowd roared with laughter. "She looks like a child," one voice shouted. "Not even fit for labor," another mocked. "She won't last a week," someone added. The girl's ears twitched at every cruel word, but she didn't cry. She had already forgotten how to cry. Her heart beat fast, but she stayed still, as if she already knew her fate. No one wanted her, not even for free. The auctioneer tried to start high. 50 credits, he called, but no hands rose. The crowd booed, some spitting on the floor. 20 credits, he shouted again, still no answer. The laughter grew louder, filling the hall like a storm. 10 credits, he barked, but even then no one cared. Finally, in frustration, he slammed his gavel on the podium. 5 credits, he growled. 5 credits and she's yours. Anyone? The market went silent for a moment. Everyone thought it was a joke. 5 credits was less than the price of a meal. The girl stood shaking, expecting no one to speak. Her mind whispered that she would be dragged back to the cages or worse, thrown away. And then, from the back of the room, a single voice rose. "I'll take her." The crowd turned to see. It was a human, tall, quiet, and serious, standing in the shadows, his hand lifted slowly, holding a small pouch of coins. The auctioneer blinked, stunned, then grinned. "Sold!" he shouted, slamming the gavel. The crowd exploded in laughter. "A human bought her," they jeered. "What will he do with that trash?" "Maybe he likes broken toys," one man joked. 5 credits wasted, another sneered, but the human ignored them all. He walked forward with steady steps. The guards pushed the girl toward him, almost laughing as they handed her over. She trembled, waiting for the strike of a hand, the pull of a chain, the cruelty she knew too well, but none came. Instead, the human looked down at her with unreadable eyes. He said nothing, only took her chain gently and cut it loose with a small blade at his belt. The iron fell to the ground, clattering loudly. The girl flinched, staring up at him with wide eyes. Was this another trick? Another kind of cruelty? The human bent down, his voice low, almost calm. "Come," he said. Nothing more. And then he turned, walking away from the jeering crowd. The girl followed, her weak steps stumbling on the dusty floor. Her mind screamed with confusion. Why would a human spend even 5 credits on her? What did he want? What would he do? As they disappeared into the night, the crowd's laughter echoed behind them. But in that laughter, hidden under the noise, a strange feeling stirred in the girl's chest. A tiny spark, so small she almost didn't notice. It was not hope, not yet, but it was something close. Hook for next part. She had been bought for a price less than a meal, treated as a joke by the galaxy. But what she did not know was that this human would change her life forever. The road outside the alien market was cold and empty. Shadows stretched long under the pale moons. The human walked slowly, his boots crunching against the dusty ground. Beside him, the little alien girl stumbled, trying to keep up with his steps. Her thin legs shook, her body weak from hunger. Yet she forced herself forward. She was too afraid to stop, too afraid to be left behind. The market's laughter still echoed in her ears. Their cruel voices called her trash, worthless, a joke. She believed them. She had always believed them. So why had this human spoken up? Why had he paid even 5 credits for her? Her heart raced, but she dared not ask. She kept her eyes down, waiting for the moment he would strike her or laugh at her. But the human stayed silent. The silence scared her more than shouting ever did. Every step she thought he might stop, might chain her again, might hurt her. But instead, he only walked. When she tripped on a stone and fell, he paused. Her body froze, waiting for punishment. Instead, he bent down, lifted her to her feet, and continued walking. No words, no anger, just quiet strength. It was strange, so strange it made her chest ache. After some time, they reached the edge of the colony. The humans stopped at a small metal hut, old and plain. Smoke rose from a chimney, the faint smell of food drifting out. The girl's stomach twisted painfully at the scent. She had not eaten real food in days, maybe weeks. Her lips trembled as she tried to hide her hunger. The human opened the door and stepped inside. She hesitated, her feet frozen on the dirt. No one had ever opened a door for her before. No one had ever invited her inside. The human looked back, his eyes steady but calm. "Come," he said softly. His voice held no threat, only command. She stepped in, her heart beating like a drum. Inside was simple. A bed, a chair, a small fire where soup being. Oiled, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She stood in the corner, too afraid to move. The human poured water into a small cup and set it in front of her. Her hands shook as she reached for it. She sniffed it first, expecting poison, expecting trickery. But it was only clean water. She drank slowly, every drop like a miracle. Her eyes watered, but she did not let tears fall. Then, without a word, the human gave her a piece of bread. She froze, staring at it, unable to believe it was for her. "Eat," he said, calm and firm. She bit into it, the taste filling her empty stomach. For the first time in years, she ate without fear. But still, she did not understand. Why was he feeding her? Why was he silent? Every master before him had shouted, cursed, or struck her. This human did none of those things. He only watched her with steady eyes. It was not pity, not cruelty. It was something else she could not name. After she ate, she whispered, her voice trembling. What do you want from me?" The human did not answer at once. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, looking into the fire. At last he said, "Rest." One word, simple and heavy. She blinked in confusion. Rest was something slaves were never given. She wanted to ask more, but her eyes grew heavy. Her body, starved for safety, gave in to sleep. She curled up on the floor, too afraid to touch the bed. But as the fire crackled and the human stayed silent, for the first time in her life, her sleep was not filled with chains. It was filled with questions she could not answer. Who was this man? Why had he bought her? Why had he given her water and food instead of pain? Hook for next part. In the morning, she would learn something even stranger, something that would change her life again. The human wanted to give her something she never thought she would have. A name. Morning light crept through the cracks of the old hut. The small alien girl opened her eyes slowly, unsure if she was dreaming. The fire had died down, the smell of smoke faint in the air. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw him, the human, sitting quietly near the table, sharpening a small knife. Her body tensed, fear rushing back. She thought maybe this was the moment he would hurt her. Maybe his silence was only a trick, but the human did not move toward her. He only looked up once, his eyes calm, then back to his work. The girl stayed curled in her corner, waiting, trembling. At last, the human spoke, his voice low, steady. "There," he said, nodding toward the table. On it lay a bowl of warm food, steam rising gently. Her stomach growled loud enough to shame her. Still she hesitated, whispering, "For me?" The human gave no long answer, only a single word. "Eat." Her hands shook as she crawled closer. She picked up the bowl, expecting him to strike for her boldness, but no strike came, only silence. The food was simple, bread soaked in broth, a few pieces of root. But to her it tasted richer than a feast. Every bite warmed her hollow stomach, every swallow eased the pain she had carried for years. Tears burned her eyes, but she kept her face low so he would not see. No one had ever fed her without demand. No one had given without taking more. When she finished, the human stood. He opened a small chest by the wall and pulled out a folded cloth. He handed it to her, his voice quiet. "Wear this." She looked down at the cloth, old but clean. Her heart pounded. Was this kindness or another trick? Slowly she draped it around herself, her dirty rags hidden at last. The cloth smelled faintly of soap, faintly of safety. For the first time in her memory she felt covered, not exposed. She whispered so softly it was almost lost. "Thank you." The human gave a small nod, then turned to repair a broken stool. He worked with steady hands, never raising his voice, never rushing her. The girl sat in silence, watching him. Every move confused her more. Why had he bought her only to feed her, clothe her, and let her rest? What did he want from her? When night came, he set another blanket on the bed. Then he pointed to it and said simply, "Sleep here." Her eyes widened, her body frozen. "No, I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. Slaves were never allowed beds. Slaves belonged on cold floors. But the human's gaze was steady, unchanging. "Sleep," he said again, his tone firm, not cruel but unyielding. Her chest tightened. She obeyed, climbing onto the bed. The softness under her was like another world. Her hands clutched the blanket, her heart refusing to believe this was real. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the old hut made her jump. She thought he might drag her back to the floor or demand something she could not give. But the human only sat by the fire until he too lay down in the corner, his back against the wall, his weapon at his side, guarding. And so the night passed, with her still on the bed, untouched, unchained, unhurt. The girl closed her eyes at last. For the first time, she slept without chains cutting her wrists, without hunger clawing her belly, without fear choking her throat. It was not a perfect sleep, but it was a sleep she had never dreamed she would have. A roof, a bed, warmth, food, and a human who gave all of it without a word. She whispered into the blanket before sleep took her. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Hook for next part. The next day, she would learn something she never imagined. Something that would shake her heart even more. The human wanted to give her a gift no one had ever given before. A name. The morning sun slipped through the cracks of the hut. The alien girl stirred on the bed, her body still not believing it had rested on softness through the night. She sat up quickly, afraid she had stolen something she was not meant to have. Her eyes darted to the human, who was already awake, sitting by the table, fixing an old piece of armor. He looked calm, as always, his silence as heavy as stone. She lowered her head, whispering, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to take your bed." The human paused, his eyes meeting hers. "It was for you," he said, his voice even. The words made her chest tighten, confusion burning inside her. No one had ever given her anything for her. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she bowed her head again, clutching the blanket around her thin shoulders. For a while, the only sound in the hut was the scrape of metal against stone as the human sharpened his blade. Finally, he asked, his tone steady, "What is your name?" The question struck her like a blow. Her lips trembled, her mind empty. I don't have one," she whispered, her voice breaking. The silence stretched, thick and strange. Her whole life she had been called it, thing, trash, useless. Never once had she been given the honor of a name. Tears threatened to rise, but she forced them back, ashamed of her weakness. The human set down his blade and looked at her carefully. "Then I will give you one," he said. The girl's breath caught, her wide eyes lifting in shock. A name? Could such a thing be given so simply? Her heart pounded painfully, waiting. He looked at her small form, fragile but stubborn. His voice was quiet, but carried a strange weight. "Leary," he said. "I will call you Leary." The word was soft, shaped like the wind that passed through green valleys. He explained no further, but his eyes softened for the first time. The girl repeated it, her voice trembling. Leary. It felt strange on her tongue, but warm, like something gentle had finally touched her. She whispered it again, hugging the word to her chest. Leary. For the first time in her life, she was not trash, not it. She was Leary, a being with a name. Her eyes blurred, and this time she could not stop the tears. They slid down her dirty cheeks as she whispered, Thank you. The human said nothing more, only turned back to his armor. But something had changed, something deep. A chain had broken, not of iron, but of shame. The rest of the day, she repeated her name in secret, whispering it when he was not looking, touching her chest as if to feel it inside. Leary. It was hers now. It was her proof she was real. When the sun began to set, she gathered courage. She placed a small flower she had picked outside on the human's table, her voice low but steady. Thank you for my name. The human looked at the flower, then at her. For the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips, so faint she almost missed it. Her chest warmed, her fear eased just a little. That night, when she lay down on the bed again, she whispered the name until sleep took her. Leary, Leary, Leary. It was not just a sound, it was hope. Hook for next part. She had laughed once in secret when whispering her name, but soon, for the first time in years, the human would make her laugh out loud, and then cry in the same breath. Days passed slowly in the small hut. The human kept his silence, always working with his hands, fixing tools, sharpening blades, or cutting wood. The alien girl, now called Leary, followed him with wide eyes. She still did not understand why he had given her food, clothing, and a name. Every kindness confused her more, yet each day her fear grew a little weaker, replaced by a feeling she did not know. One afternoon, the human sat by the fire, carving something from a piece of wood. His knife moved carefully, his rough hands steady. Leary watched from the corner, hugging her knees. She whispered, "What are you making?" But he did not answer. He worked until the sun dipped low, until the wood took shape. Finally, he held it out toward her. It was a small toy, a little creature with round eyes and stubby legs, clumsy but full of life. Her hand shook as she reached for it. "No. For me?" she asked in disbelief. The human gave a single nod, his eyes calm. "Yes," he said, nothing more. Leary stared at the toy, her lips parting. She did not remember the last time anyone had given her a gift. She turned it in her small hands, the wood rough but warm. Something inside her chest ached, and before she knew it, a sound escaped her lips. It was small, soft, broken, but it was laughter, a real laugh, weak but true. The sound startled her, and she covered her mouth, eyes wide with fear. She looked up at the human, waiting for anger, waiting for punishment, but he only watched, a faint softness in his eyes. Her heart trembled. He had given her back something she thought was lost forever. That night, she could not sleep. The toy sat by her pillow, and she touched it again and again. Every time, the memory of her small laugh came back, and her lips almost curved again. Her chest felt lighter, as if a piece of the heavy chain around her soul had been broken. The next morning, she woke and she saw it. Arlie! She searched outside the hut until she found a tiny flower growing by the fence. Its petals were weak, struggling in the dry soil. She plucked it carefully and carried it inside. While the human was resting by the fire, she placed the flower on his table. He looked at it, then at her. Her voice shook, but she whispered, "For you, because you gave me a name, because you gave me this." She lifted the toy gently to show him. For the first time, the human's face changed. His lips curved slightly, almost a smile. The warmth of it hit her harder than any cruelty she had ever known. Her eyes blurred again, but this time not from pain. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "Why? Why are you so kind to me?" The human stood, his shadow falling across her. He reached out, not to strike, but to place his hand gently on her head. His voice was low, firm but gentle. "Because you are not trash," he said. "You are family now." Her whole body froze, her breath caught. Family. The word cut into her heart like light breaking darkness. She sobbed, trembling, clutching the toy to her chest. No one had ever called her that. No one had ever dared to give her such worth. And in that moment, she laughed again, through her tears, her first true laugh, her first true cry, both breaking free together. Hook for next part. But outside the hut, whispers spread, neighbors mocked, and shadows grew. Society would not stay silent while a human treated a broken alien as family. The days grew quieter inside the hut, but outside, whispers began to spread. People in the colony had seen the human walk away from the market with the frail alien girl. They laughed when they told the story, saying he had wasted his coins on trash. Some called him foolish, others called him weak. But as time passed, the laughter turned into whispers of anger. Why would a human keep a slave and treat her like family? Leary felt the weight of those whispers every time she stepped outside. When she went to fetch water from the well, neighbors glared. Children pointed and laughed, calling her names. Once, a man spat near her feet, sneering, "Filth doesn't belong here." Her hands shook as she carried the water back to the hut, her heart heavy, her spirit trembling. When she returned, she whispered to the human, "They hate me. They hate you because of me." The human listened, his eyes steady. "They can hate," he said firmly. "I don't care." She wanted to believe him, but her small body trembled with fear. She pressed her forehead against the wooden toy he had carved for her, as if it could protect her. Her voice cracked. "One day they will come. They will take me away." The human's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "Then they will learn," he said, his voice low. "She is mine, and I protect what is mine." Leary's chest ached at his words. Part of her wanted to beg him to let her go, to save himself from the trouble she brought. But another part of her, a stronger part, clung to the fire in his voice. No one had ever claimed her as worth protecting. No one had ever stood for her. She hid behind him like a shadow, yet her heart burned with strange warmth. The whispers grew louder. One night, as the two sat by the fire, a knock came at the hut's door. The human opened it to find 3 men standing outside, their eyes hard. "We've heard enough," one growled. "That creature doesn't belong in a human's home." Another sneered. "She'll betray you, she'll curse you, she's cursed already." Leary clutched the blanket tight, her small body pressed against the wall. The human's gaze was steady, his voice cold. "She stays," he said simply, then shut the door in their faces. The next day, more insults followed. At the market, people whispered louder when he passed. When Leary trailed behind him, heads turned, mocking voices rose. "She'll never be worth anything," someone laughed. "Throw her back in the cages where she belongs," another shouted. Leary lowered her head, tears burning her eyes. She whispered, "Please stop taking me outside, they only hate you more." But the human placed his hand on her shoulder. "You will walk beside me," he said. "Always." That night, Leary lay awake, clutching the toy. Her thoughts tangled, fear and warmth mixing inside her. She whispered into the dark, "Why does he fight for me? Why won't he let me go?" The human, half asleep by the fire, opened his eyes and said softly, "Because you belong with me now." The words wrapped around her like a shield. Even as fear clawed at her heart, she felt safe in a way she never thought possible. But deep inside, she knew the whispers were not empty. They would not stop. They would grow louder until someone acted. Hook for next part. And soon her fear would come true. Strangers would arrive at their door demanding to take her away, and the human would be forced to stand against them. The night was heavy and still. The fire inside the hut had burned low, its glow soft against the walls. Leary sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the wooden toy the human had carved for her. Her small hands trembled, her ears twitching at every sound outside. Something in her chest told her danger was close. The human sat in his usual place by the door, sharpening his blade, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. He had noticed the whispers in the colony growing darker, and he knew it was only a matter of time before someone tested his resolve. Then, the knock came, heavy and loud. Leary jumped, nearly dropping the toy. The human rose slowly, his hand tightening around the hilt of his blade. When he opened the door, the night air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of dust and smoke. 3 figures stood outside, their shadows long under the moonlight. Behind them, more men lurked in the dark, faces hidden but voices rough with mockery. One of them stepped forward, tall and broad, his grin sharp. "We've come for the creature," he said, his tone filled with disdain. "You bought trash from the market, human, but she belongs with filth, not in a man's home." Another voice from behind laughed. "Give her back and maybe we'll let you be." Leary froze where she sat, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart screamed that this was the end. Her mind told her the human would push her outside to save himself. It would not be the first time someone threw her away to survive. She clutched the toy tighter, whispering, "Don't fight for me, I'm not worth it." The human turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. In his gaze was no hesitation, no doubt. His voice came firm and steady, louder than the men outside. "You are worth more than they can ever pay." Leary's eyes widened, tears burning her vision. No one had ever said such words. No one had ever believed she was worth anything. Her lips trembled, her voice breaking. "But they will hurt you." The human's jaw tightened, his blade gleaming in the dim light. "Let them try," he said coldly. The leader outside laughed, slamming a fist against the doorframe. "Brave words for a fool who keeps garbage," he spat. He signaled to the others and one stepped forward with a torch, its flame dancing wickedly. "We'll burn this place down," another growled. "Let's see if your pet is still worth keeping." Fear shot through Leary's chest like fire. She rushed to the human, clutching his arm, her small body trembling. "Please," she begged, "just let me go. I don't want you to die because of me." The human's hand rested gently on her head, steady and strong. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice softer now but filled with steel. She shook her head desperately, but he stepped forward, blocking the doorway. The men outside shouted, their anger filling the night. Some called for fire, others for chains. The human raised his blade, his voice ringing out like thunder. "She stays with me," he declared, "and anyone who tries to take her will answer to me." The air grew tense. The firelight flickered across hard faces. Leary's breath came in short gasps, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break. The crowd outside shifted, weapons raised, the torchlight glinting against iron, and in that moment she realized the truth. This human would not abandon her. He would fight, even against many, even if it cost him everything. Hook for next part, and when the first strike came, blood and fire would fall upon the hut, forcing them into a battle neither had ever asked for, but one that would seal their bond forever. The night erupted in shouts. The men outside raised their weapons, their eyes gleaming with anger. One of them hurled a torch at the hut, the flames licking against the dry wood. Leary screamed, clutching the human's arm, her body trembling with terror. Smoke curled into the air, the roof beginning to crackle. The human stepped forward, his blade flashing in the moonlight. The first attacker lunged, swinging a rusted axe. With one swift move, the human caught the blow, steel clashing with sparks. He shoved the man back, his strength raw and unshaken. The others cursed, circling, their boots pounding against the dirt. Inside the hut, fire spread quickly. The wooden walls groaned as flames climbed higher. Leary coughed, the smoke stinging her eyes. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet would not move. Her heart pounded as she watched the man who had bought her for nothing fight like a soldier. The second attacker charged, a spear in his hand. The human sidestepped, slashing across the man's arm. Blood sprayed. The man howled, stumbling back into the shadows. The others hesitated now, fear flashing across their faces. They had thought he was only a fool with a useless slave, but this was no fool. This was a warrior. "Stay back," one shouted. "He's not alone." But no one else came. Only the fire and the silence of the night bore witness. Leary cried out, her small voice breaking. "Please stop. They will kill you." The human's voice was like stone, steady and fierce. "They will not touch you." Another man rushed forward with a torch, trying to shove it into the doorway. The human blocked him, driving his blade deep into the dirt at the man's feet. The shock sent him stumbling back, the fire dropping into the mud. But the flames inside the hut were already spreading. The air grew hotter, smoke choking the small room. The human glanced back at Leary, her small form trembling, her face pale in the glow. Without hesitation, he dropped his blade and rushed inside. He lifted her into his arms, her weak hands clutching his shirt. The heat seared against his skin as the fire roared. The roof cracked above them, sparks falling like burning rain. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice calm even as the world burned. She buried her face into his chest, her tears mixing with the smoke. He carried her through the flames, shielding her with his body. The men outside shouted in disbelief as he burst through the doorway. Fire trailed behind him, the hut collapsing in on itself. He did not stop running until they reached the edge of the fields. The cool night air rushed over them, carrying away the smoke. He set her down gently on the grass. Her eyes were wide, her chest heaving. Behind them, the hut burned to the ground, the fire lighting up the night sky. The attackers stood at a distance, stunned into silence. None dared step forward now, their courage broken. They had seen the way he fought, the way he carried her through the fire. Slowly, one by one, they slipped into the darkness, leaving only whispers behind. Leary looked at the burning remains of the only place she had felt safe. Her lips trembled, her small voice breaking. "The house. It's gone." The human knelt beside her, his eyes steady, his tone firm. "Houses can be built again," he said. "But you cannot be replaced." Her tears spilled freely now, not only for the loss of the home, but for the words he had spoken. She clutched the wooden toy to her chest, even though it was now blackened with soot. Her voice shook. "Why do you care so much for me?" The human placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because you are mine," he said, "and I protect what is mine." Hook for next part. The fire had taken their home, but not their bond. Now with nothing but ashes behind them, they would face a harder road, and Leary would learn that her worth to him was greater than she ever dreamed. The night after the fire was long and heavy. The hut was gone. Only blackened wood and smoking ashes remained. The human and Leary sat on the hillside, the glow of the ruin flickering behind them. The stars stretched above, cold and endless, yet somehow less frightening than the flames they had just escaped. Leary hugged her knees, her eyes swollen from smoke and tears. Her small body shivered in the night air. The blanket she carried now singed and torn. She whispered, her voice cracking, "We have nothing now, not even walls, not even a roof." The human sat beside her, his gaze steady on the burning remains. "Homes can be built again," he said firmly, "but you cannot be replaced." Her chest tightened at his words. She lowered her head, whispering, "But I cost you everything. Because of me, you lost your house. Because of me, they came." The human turned toward her, his expression unshaken. "They came because they hate what they don't understand," he said, his voice calm. "I lost wood and stone, but I kept what matters." His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steady and warm. "You are alive, and that is worth more than any home." Her throat closed, tears spilling again. but this time they carried a strange warmth. All her life she had been told she was worthless, a burden, a curse. Yet here was a man who saw her as something worth saving, worth protecting. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why do you see me differently?" The human's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Because I know what it means to lose everything," he said, and fell silent again. The next days were hard. Without a home, they camped by the edge of the fields. The human gathered wood, built a small shelter with his hands. It was not much, only branches and cloth. But it kept the wind away. Leary helped where she could, carrying sticks, fetching water, cleaning. Her small steps were clumsy, but she did as all. Her effort was real. She wanted to prove she was not only a burden. At night they shared bread by the fire. Leary often looked up at the stars, her voice small. "Do you think I can be more than what they say I am?" The human's answer was always steady. "You already are," he said. His words were simple, but to her they felt like a wall of protection against the whole world. One afternoon, while searching the fields, a trader stopped them. He eyed Leary with cruel interest, then looked at the human. "I'll pay you good money for her," he said, smirking. "Slaves are worth more than 5 credits in the right markets." Leary froze, her heart twisting in fear. She thought just for a moment that maybe the human would consider it. But the man's eyes turned to steel. "She is not for sale," he said coldly. The trader laughed. "Every slave has a price." The human's grip tightened on his blade, his voice like thunder. "She is not a slave," he said. "She is my joy." Leary gasped, her breath catching in her throat. His joy, the words echoed inside her, breaking the chains of shame she had carried all her life. Her tears came fast, but she did not hide them. For the first time she allowed herself to believe, to truly believe, that she was more than trash, more than a joke, that to someone she mattered. That night, she placed a small stone circle around their fire. She whispered softly, "So the flames cannot spread again." When the human asked why, she looked up shyly. "Because this time, I want to protect you too." His eyes softened again, and for once, silence was not heavy, but gentle. Hook for next part. Their bond was now unbreakable, but destiny had one more test. Soon Leary would confess the secret she had carried in her heart, and the human would realize she was not only his joy, but also his salvation. The night was quiet again. Only the small fire flickered between them. The new shelter was weak, built from branches and cloth, but it held enough warmth. Leary sat close to the flames, her small hands cupped around the wooden toy he had carved. Her eyes reflected the glow, wide and full of thought. She whispered softly, "Do you regret it? Spending even 5 credits on me?" The human looked at her, his face calm, his eyes steady. "No," he said simply. Leary lowered her head, her voice trembling. "But I cost you everything, your house, your peace, even your standing with the colony, all because of me." The human's jaw tightened, but his voice carried no anger. "I lost wood and stone, things that can be rebuilt, but you cannot be replaced." Her throat closed at his words, tears stinging her eyes. She hugged the toy tight to her chest, whispering, "Why? Why do you say such things? Don't you see? I am nothing." The human reached out, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. His voice was low but firm. "You were nothing to them, but to me, you are everything." The fire crackled. The night air wrapped around them. For a long moment she stayed silent, her tears falling softly onto her hands. Then she looked up at him, her voice shaking but brave. "There's something I've never told anyone, not even myself sometimes." Her small chest rose and fell, her lips trembling as she forced the words out. "All my life I wanted someone, just one person to see me, not as a slave, not as trash, but as someone worth saving, and when you bought me for 5 credits I thought it was another cruel joke." Her voice cracked, her tears flowing freely now. But you gave me food, you gave me shelter, you gave me a name, and now, I don't know how to live without you. The human listened, silent as always, his face unreadable. But when she finished, he leaned closer, his hand brushing her high, but gently aside. You live, he said, his voice steady, because now you are mine, and I will never let anyone take you again. Her heart pounded, her tears spilling faster, but this time they were not only of pain, they were of relief, of hope, of something she had never dared dream of. She whispered, almost broken, "You bought me for nothing, but you gave me everything." The human nodded, his eyes softening in the firelight. "And in return," he said, "you gave me something I never thought I would have again." She blinked, confused. "What? What did I give you?" The human's lips curved in the faintest smile. "You gave me joy," he answered. "You are my greatest joy." The words struck her deeper than any chain ever had. Her small hand shook as she reached for him, and for the first time, she did not hold back her tears or her trembling. She leaned against him, her head pressed against his chest. The steady beat of his heart thundered in her ears, strong and certain. Her voice was small but filled with emotion. "Then I will never leave you." The human wrapped his arm around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The fire burned low, the stars glittered above, and the ruins of the past lay far behind them. The galaxy had laughed at her once, called her worthless, called her a joke, but in his arms she was no longer trash, no longer nameless. She was Leary, she was alive, she was loved. Final line. Bought for only 5 credits, the galaxy's joke became his greatest joy. And together, they were no longer broken, but whole.